a light that will shine, shine, shine on your mind, mind, mind. Yeah, so bright, 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 bright.
Well, good day.
Wow.
Hello.
Hello, Sevan.
Hey.
Oh,
How are you on this beautiful day?
Oh man, it's still beautiful out here. It's an amazing day. I'm
Mm-hmm.
uh I'm feeling good about the connection. I've actually been really anticipating this all day. So it never goes away. You always feel excited and you feel the little feeling in the stomach.
Uh-huh. Yeah, the butterflies. We were just talking about that.
mhm.
Absolutely. It's nice energy today.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
well, Sevan, you've come on our radio recently, as this incredibly multifaceted and enigmatic speaker that you are, who consistently elevates the discussion of really anything and everything, may it be mental, spiritual, physical matters. And you bring forth a truly unique idea uh, and depth of looking at it that is just most remarkable. Um, Now I want to quickly just mention your contact stuff here. If anybody wants to see this plethora of what Seven has been putting out, you can go to astralquest.com. And as I understand, the other web page where you have an archive of that sort is theresistance2010.com.
Yes.
And you're also coming up with a new platform that I'm sure we'll talk about in just a little bit. Um, you focus on finding the esoteric meaning within language through your in-depth study, of linguistics, ciphering, etymology, all that stuff, and aims to discover what is beyond the veil, by analyzing that internally, symbols, occult sigils, geometry, and that is kind of well, you do put an emphasis on the inner workings in the body and how we can reclaim that for ourselves and what's to do there. And that is kind of what we want to talk about today, the inner workings, especially the portals that you've been
Yes.
talking about and how they pertain to our universal conversation, word or not word, whatever it may be, between us individuals and also in connection to all the other beings in the universe that are communicating constantly with us through these portals. And
Yes.
we had sent you a little article. I'm not sure if you got to it, but that is kind
Yes,
of.
I did.
Mm-hmm.
I did actually cover it in its entirety. It was very beautifully written, I must add.
Thank you. All right. I mean, let's
Well,
get
you
right into it
well,
from here. That is.
yeah, well, see, this is the calm before the storm, I'm telling you, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind coming in a little slow and getting it started, versus, some of my older recordings. Obviously, I go right in and just go nuts on the situation. But of course, now things are getting a lot more honed in and specific to exactly what people want and need to hear. Some feel like this is a want, some feel like this is a need. And there's somewhat of a difference. I think the difference is arousal or fear. Generally, if someone needs something, there's generally a fear attached to having to uh, to get that. Like if you need breath, you don't just want breath. But wants are, of course, arousals and desires. And we've really honed in on in the dualistic plane that there's really two energies present. And then once those two energies come together, you get the reaction or the third energy, as I was seeing you so eloquently put in the post. And I guess my only disclaimer today is, for all the listeners to remember that the map is not the terrain itself. And that just means that with all the instructions and eloquent speech and things that we can put together, that's us bringing it to you on a platter, but it's still up to you to take the journey and to also be very serious about this journey, not to confuse reading in books and confuse studying things as necessarily a part of the main focus of the journey, but more a part of the deprogramming,
Mm.
which has to come into play first because it's what breaks down the numerous expressions and different explanations of division that we have to divide up what we would just say is the total sum of all things. I do personally feel like I'm on the way to experiencing that. I feel like, to tell you the truth, that many people are, and it's not something that's really avoidable. And the best thing to do is to begin to become familiar with the space, just like when you came into this world and you had to get familiar with different things to gain a good level of discernment. Discernment's always needed because it does gain intelligence. It gains and test instinct and many different things that we'll need along this experience through immortality. And backing off of all of this, I would definitely say that we should look at this as our EverQuest. In your experience through what you would do as an immortal, which doesn't have an end. So you really can spend as much time as you want, figuring out certain things or being in certain systems. But if you're looking to be a connoisseur of this, then you've come to the right place. This has obviously been 7 or 8 years of consistent projecting a specific type of message that's been unfolding itself as it goes and still has yet to render its full load. And so, yeah, that's how I can bring it into this. Like I said, I feel very balanced today, so it's going to be a very balanced projection, but also some occult level, adept level. I always say unoccultism. That's just making what is hidden revealed. But some adept level stuff, because obviously there's plenty of radio shows and different things out there that you can get some surface level information, like, trust yourself and balance yourself and eat the right things and a slew of lists of things that people can just say that appear to be connected to spirituality. But for the real connoisseur, again, if we're going to talk portals, or we're going to talk about going into different states of consciousness, frequency, time travel, this kind of thing, then I would suggest pulling in for the long haul, getting something comfortable, taking a couple deep breaths, and then watching this flow between Kristina and Stefan and myself.
Beautiful. So maybe at the beginning we would like to introduce you how we stepped into all the subject we placed into our article and all the moon and energetical triangle subjects we are so involved now and so interested and so passionate about the discovery, and which we so would like to share with people. So everything happened maybe a year ago for me, or even a bit more maybe. So first of all, it was from the download, which I usually have some of them because I'm an artist and I'm more sensitive to the energies, and just I saw a download as a story once about a Pleiadian sisters, which were 9 of them, and they brought the moon here as a artificial ship, who were carried throughout our universe to connect with planet Earth. And that wasn't even those sisters as all of them, but only for in particular one sister who carried all the feminine energy. And I accidentally even wrote a poem about it. So that sister brought the moon here, even though she was warned by her energies around and her family members that it's kind of difficult journey to be, and it's dangerous, and it's even pointless because here situation is kind low in energetical level, and they won't be able to embrace the moon energy. But she did that because she wanted to do that, and she felt the calling, and so in order to save the life here. And because moon was the DNA storehouse, or the storehouse of the life itself. So she came here and she started that life embracing and lifting here. And since energies changed, since we came through another consciousness awareness from one time of the yuga cycle to the another, so energies became corrupted in many ways, and so she couldn't do that anymore alone. And because all the energy around densiest many times than it was before, and she allegorically died in an energetical way, embodying herself to moon energy. And that's why she is moon, and that's why moon is she. And that was how I saw in that vision. And the meaning is that the purpose of moon was pure at the first time. So today we express that moon is more malevolent aspect carrier here to us, all the zombie and all the money and all those malevolent aspects. But at the first core, it was the pure purpose to save life, to carry life throughout the universe, to carry the echo of the life throughout the universe, to bring it to safe place, to expand, to nurture and love. That was the primordial purpose, which I felt the amazing love, the same as planet Earth emanates to humanity and all the rest of the cosmos. And then when Moon came here with that sister, when the ship came here, then because of the loss of the consciousness, which occurred because of yuga cycles, they are natural ones, and great people, so to speak, in a metaphorical way, they took it, and she so loved Moon and all energies. She just stored that all energy within that Moon storehouse, that lighthouse. So she ended up with a conclusion that she's going to embody herself in the energy of ship forever and become one with that ship energetically, just completely grow into that ship. And in this way, always staying with energy of storehouse of life, because Moon also um, is influencing our instinctual nature, our creative energies as well, our regenerative energies as well. So she will be ecliptical unconditionally, for example, the same as the sun. And great people teased her after that and tortured her after that. Uh, that's only an allegory for the malevolent aspects people do. And by evolving only malevolent aspects in her and keeping info from people about energy triangle, which can heal our generations and all the mankind and nature in general. So I feel that was the message I got from the moon goddess, and that was kind of the story, a dream, and it really was very bright to me and very vivid. And after that, I just came to their conclusion about the energy triangle. It also just came as a confirmation of that story from the same moon goddess, which is not like a being, it's only an energy. So she just came for that new revelation, and she revealed us the her energy triangle for us to be aware again and to start to use it in proper ways with all the angles same and equal, as we mentioned in our article. So that was the story which influenced us to look into this subject deeper, and we spent lots of times, and that was like inspirational outburst for us. And yeah, so yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's how we
Oh,
came.
excuse me. Excuse me. I had my had my mute on. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't, cloud up the noise channel when you were transmitting that. And what I would say is that I can definitely see how the person or individual or thought form that conceived that story of the moon came to those assumptions. In addition, it's definitely a time now where we have access to a certain level of information about celestial bodies and celestial mechanics, because it gets a lot into the orbits and it gets a lot into a lot more specific things, because of course we're talking about planetary systems and stars and things that actually emit energy. But it's very easy to see after a while, especially when traveling through the fields of heavy levels of occultism, that the moons and the stars really do become what we make them over periods of time. And this is very similar to what you see today, even in factions like Hollywood, where you will watch an artist be completely influenced by all of the different stars and fans. And if there's a notion that the more that is given, the more that will be reciprocated, like the more that I push out, the more that I'll get back, because the ancient people were very familiar with reflecting off the stars, okay? And this is basically coming into a genuflection or a communion with another star and then beginning to cycle energy with it until you can speed that energy up into a higher oscillation or slow it down. This is basically called phasing. And so that way you can be on the exact same channel as this star's emission. And what this is really about is this is about something where if you want to just talk energy, okay, the energy levels of what we're talking about are so far over what a pentagram or a 5-base body can really hold. If we're just looking for energy, there's a lot of different things that we can tap into that don't really even have personalities in a sense to stories that go behind them, what we call eidolons. Like there's minerals and those kind of elements, like through alchemy, that are basically the noble or pure form of a specific frequency.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get into the saga, what I just call the drama, the Dragon Mother, then you see a constant oscillation that's no different than what we're experiencing as supreme beings also, that you have access to many facets and many reflections of yourself. And it's just about the formula that you choose to use and who you choose to reciprocate your energy with. So let's say, for instance, in that story, it says that the moon chose to begin to reciprocate its energy with the life forms that lived on the planet, and then somehow got into a lock-in or a bad situation to a certain degree. What I would say about this is that we first have to see that all celestial bodies, humans, and every entity that you would see that exists in a devacanic plane, which is basically any physical worlds that you can stand on something and touch something. It has a male and a female side, a masculine and a feminine side. Mm-hmm. And this becomes like the beginning of understanding celestial mechanics and understanding the knowledge that's encased within the depth things. And it's because that actually tests the polarization of you. This is how the knowledge actually locks the profane out of it, by seeing if you're still judging, like one's male, one's female, these are hard-coded judgments, then they will only be able to see one side. Maybe sometimes that's what they call the good side, or maybe sometimes that's what they call the bad side, but it will always be impartial to that if we see any of the bodies. It's easy just to see them as bodies just like yours, as completely one or completely the other. Moon story is actually very unique because it's quite enigmatic through history. It's played a certain kind of role. It is a mirror in itself, also known as the looking glass. But in every sense, it's a looking glass to a lot more than people can even remember we were involved in. So what you get is you get the moon as the chief masquerader, which is basically to appear as one thing to most people and really be something else. So like, let's say, for instance, in our space and time, we think of the moon as a female, so the moon would definitely be a male. And if, as far as what is it more of? And this is how it was said in the ancient times. It's male and female, but mostly female. Male and female, but mostly male. And then, of course, just like any other body, it could choose to change. It could have a sex change. And that's why a lot of the things that are going on with the moon are hermaphrodite or is hermaphroditic, right? So what happens is that what the celestial body known as the moon is really encased with is the first house, the first step on the ladder that one will climb and getting into another state of consciousness. And that's why you can see so many things connected to it, like money, materialism, sex, evil, darkness, all sorts of different things that give you what would give you the reason why the moon is right above where we are. Why is it in this one first celestial house that is exercising dominion? Oh, well, because it's hosting more in its platform, per se, its state of consciousness, its frequency, than most could fully encompass, right? Mm-hmm. Like imagine if you know 30% of what the moon's about, that other 70% must be some stuff that you don't even really want to even think about, right? Because there's a lot of different things in history, as you'll see. I call it the golem effect. And this is when there's some kind of relic or some kind of energy that causes great power, which is what the moon does, and which is why many people forgot how to use the moon. They were made to forget. But what happens is that there's this literally a God complex that starts. And as the energy keeps building, and the person begins to, or the being begins to come more and more out of balance, they actually get on this cycle themselves to where they're consistently doing what we would call good and evil. And so, this equals the phases of the moon. This equals why the moon has this procession that it goes throughout the sky with intensity of procession of what it goes through its frequency and its intensity of energy. It talks about in many writings about how it connects to, in ancient times, the sacrifices that took place to increase the fertility of the land. That's part of the golem effect. That's when you see something is working. Alkalinity within the blood, the full magnetism phase of the moon on anything will produce something, because you're just talking about energetics here. So what I believe is that people get an opportunity to come from underneath the dominion of the Lord, because that's who the moon is. The moon was always seen as a male. That's why the moon's daughter was Ishtar. So if going back to when all this mythology really started, you have to go to the civilization that started writing it. And the Chaldeans or the Sumerians wrote this story. And it doesn't mean that this story is even true from our aspect of wanting to understand what's true and what's false. We would just have to scan it to see, is there a blueprint resident in this knowledge that we can find in every place that we go to?
Yep.
Because that's going to determine whether it's just the political agenda of the king, which is like what the Bible is, what the Quran is, these kind of different books. Or is it true spiritual knowledge, which generally comes through experience, is seldom written down, and then generally transmitted through Kabbalah, or which is oral resuscitation. Some elder is telling you about it, versus anything else, because again, one would have to need to go into the experience to see that, well, maybe he's telling the truth, because, or maybe he's lying, because that's the only thing that will be able to tell is the experience. But if obviously I don't have time to be sitting here lying, so I'm telling you that the entities that are generally connected to this planet, the ones that if you ever seen any kind of animate entity running around, that would be classified as an angel or an angle. Mm-hmm. An angle moves with the degrees of the moon. So these are direct frequencies. It's very, very imperative to stop seeing these beings as people, or just on pentagram templates. But they move on the frequencies of the degrees of that celestial body. They are basically chained, if you may, to that celestial body. And that's when, if you come in harmony with any kind of celestial body, you become chained to it. And that chain is the orbit. Because the orbit is a gravitational, aka orgasmic, energy that pulls you in because you have some kind of connection, or you feel some kind of connection with it. So this is why the moon became the Lord, because that's the only star that at night that people can really see. You know, so there's only the sun and there's the moon, and these are always two different paths, right? But in every sense, the moon played a heavy role at being, because it was tied into the waves, it was tied into water, it was tied into so many different things that people could actually see, versus what would happen way later on in the future and happen almost in the beginning, but never in the middle, which is when you can see what the sun is actually doing. So just remember, the people on Earth, under dominion of the moon, needing really to eat. And that's really what the first sign of, you see in the name of Saturn is EA, and that's the beginning of eating, okay? So it means to consume. You consume the pranayama, you consume the prana, you live in the pranayama. What this means is that if somehow you become tied into the elements where you need the elements to survive, then you will live in a devacanic plane. And every master knows this. So the next thing to really even becoming a master is to master what? The elements. And I like what you said in your statement, to start considering people with the pettiest mind. That's even if we consider these planets at all and these things at all as people, that's what really makes our mind petty. Because it's something far more grand and intense, because it's actually us. And then when we realize that we're controlling these energies, we're controlling these bodies, and they have little to no external control of us, we see them not as external objects. That's when you become a full master. But there was a really straightforward method of this kind of accomplishment within the ancient teachings, and something that I'm, rigorously putting myself through up until the moment. And that's basically holding your frequency amongst the elements. And I'll explain this in very simple. If you can get on the frequency of fire, Do you think the straw man can withstand fire? Do we think the straw man can withstand wind? And what I mean by the straw man, the straw man is a term that is, of course, used to denote the fake names that we've been given and these fake personalities and these fake identities, right? And then you ask yourself, realistically, what are we supposed to do if our entire culture is hijacked, our spiritual powers have been stripped, and we've been enslaved by the elements? Sit here and probably make up stories about what's going on, that we chose to even do this, when our ancestors would never, 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 never. You would never breach their holies of holies with that kind of idea, because it would break their entire will, because that's what we'll be talking about tonight, your will, like how to have and how to repair wills, because that's what portals really are, right? They're chakras or wheels, they're spinning. And when the wheel is broken or the gem is cracked, or when someone's stolen your jewels, maybe a Jew, what happens is you end up with a missing piece or missing pieces, and then the body can't fire off. So then the same thing that becomes the way we can really experience, as much as you can even use that word, everything, becomes our coffin in a certain sense. Because if you get sick, if you don't feel well, or if the waves of emotions and the elements move around the wrong way against you or diametrically opposed to you, then you find you can't even really do what you're doing now. Meaning you have to be in a certain condition, even study spiritual knowledge, right? It's like, you can't study spiritual knowledge with the guy hacking off on the chainsaw next door, or the room extremely cold, or your leg, bleeding, or you see, so there's all these other things that have to be set into the proper and proper modes for you to be able to get into perceptions. And so when we ask ourselves, well, who's designing this projection? If we jump up and say, well, I'm designing it, then that, of course, means you've reached sovereign level. But if you find that you're still using money, if you find that basically any sources of your power, whether it's electricity, water is a power, of course. Like people think, how's water power? Water, we have to drink it. It gives us energy. It's one of the main powers. So until the powers come from us, then we will always be brokering and selling. Look at these two words. A broker, that means it's a broke a piece off, right? Devacanic piece. And selling, this is like a sell. Yeah. Okay, dividing something into cells. So you'll be brokering and selling for energy. And then you'll give what you have, what you've achieved. And this is why the moon became synonymous with sacrificing children, because it could be your ideas. So people see things so literally. But if your ideas don't escape behind the threshold of the moon and the gravitational pull of that celestial body, then you will be stuck by G. Okay, now G is the symbol of the Masonic compass, because they say it stands for gravity, right? It's also a 6. But it is every tense of a 6 and gravity, because 6 is what we know as sex. In Kabbalah, we remove all the vowels, so it's just SX. So 6, which gives you the 6-pointed star, the 2 interlacing triangles, is what the Lord of the Moon really does use to keep the continuous populating going on. So that way, and I'm not saying at all let's depopulate, but what I'm saying is when there's a continuous replication of the species, the genes and the knowledge to pass to the next species weakens. Why? Because like what we're doing now, we're not sitting down with the children telling them a metaphoric but true conception of the cosmos crater. You see, we barely even get time with them. There's so many ideas that are being pushed out there. They just don't have enough soil to go in, right? So there's so many children out there. There's no real family or soil to cultivate them, to take them to the next level. So the Dominion uses the pent up energy mainly, okay? Because this is really why there's a pin in pentagram. Our fields open and close, right? So sometimes the energy can be pent up. And because most of the energy is sexual, then the key component or dynamic, like if you looked at what that being was holding as a rod in its hand, when the Kemetans drew the moon as a staff or zoomorphied it, then you would see all the characteristics and the trait of what it would take to climb that ladder. Now, this is a Titan's job, meaning that you have to be a phenomenal being to begin to run the circuits. Like, this is what something like the Olympics and all these things are modeled after, is really what's called the great race. This is when you get a chance to oscillate through all of your spectrums, mainly 9 colors, right? And then the millions can be made from there. But you get a chance to oscillate through all those experiences and see how fast you can connect the circuit. Meaning, how fast and how long did it take for you to get it this time? Like, is it now all making sense, or just some of it's making sense, right? This is the questions that we're asking ourselves. Like, how long have you really been on this? When did the clock start? That would be the only race. And so this race against time, I can tell you, we've overcome. And really where I'm at today, and all of those that are with me, is working on really the deprogramming of getting people involved in going through this experience, which is going to have to happen for themselves. And also putting the right type of HUD or GUI, meaning the actual filter that the person is looking through. You actually have to phase in with that filter for a moment to peer them, to give them spotlight into this other state of consciousness that you're so gladly inhabiting already. And that's just the interesting part about it, is to, when we board another state of consciousness, when we board another individual's portal, let's simplify this portal thing, because some people think, oh my goodness, these alien extraterrestrial UFO conversations just go way over my head. Well, let me explain way over your head and what your head is, okay? On the diagram, the head would be the first perfect perception. It's called heaven. Okay, it's the first dimension before the rest of arms, which are Mars and Taurus and torso, and all the rest of them get added on. Okay, so in that perfect conception, you will see this orb, which is basically your head. Now, it's not a perfect orb, just like the planet is not a perfect circle, but you get the point. So what happens is that in the head, there are 7 orifices, okay? And then there's one that's hidden. There's always one that's hidden in all the knowledge, but there's 7 orifices. This is two ears, 2 nostrils, 2 eyes, okay? And then 1 mouth. So the mouth, of course, always is the governor, and it's the chief. The mouth also actually stands for the moon. It is in the tense, when you put it onto that scope of the body, it is the phallus. The tongue is the phallus of the face. So this is where the manifestation is really coming from the upper globe, is right out of the mouth, because regardless of what everyone thought about, what comes out of the mouth is what everyone agreed on. You see? So if you take this orb as your head, then you can start to realize why certain types of numerology is used for these in and out portals. And then what really causes these 2 really identical slots in your face is, of course, a left and a right. So one, in a sense, is taking in, and one is always pushing out. And when you can start to tamper with that, we call it hacking the brain, and actually balance them more, that's when you get into the phenomena. You actually get into the zone. It's a real space. And in this space, the energy potential is so high, I'm still trying to figure out what to do when I'm there. It's more like, okay, that's too much. Okay, I'm almost getting it. Now in the dream world, I'm able to handle it more. But I'm still working on grounding that and handling that just from a physical body, because it has a real energetic potential, like Dynamo Jack, Qigong Master. It's like fire and a few more elements. And so it takes managing, is what I'm saying. So, but this is something that, I would say, if we came into this and we didn't know anything about it, oh, glorious. Because somehow we've done the impossible and made ourselves forget, if you want to take the story that way. But this means that the glass is half full. This means that where we're going, and I've already been, is so amazing. It's still, it's a group thing, group mind. Like, you even know right away, this ain't something for just me. And this is why when you see those that are still talking about me and their power and all that, it's just kind of hilarious at this point, because there's so much power the last thing you're really looking for is power. You're looking really more for control of your faculties of perception while you're in that space. And so let's talk about this. When you reach the balance, you get into the zone, okay? And then things line up. And then what happens is the energy in the body is free flowing. And this is because the mind, which is also the governor, is no longer in the play. The mind was also known as Hanuman, the monkey, the moon key, old baboon face thought or thought. Okay, because what happens is the moment you try to balance, and if you've ever tried to get out of the body before, you'll see it happen. You think, oh my goodness, oh no. Am I gonna die? And then the energy just, it goes down. And then you have to work your way back up the ladder again for the same thing to happen again. For Hanuman to grab your second ran, which is basically the vehicle you travel with when you get out of the body. It's more easy to deal with gravity with that vehicle. We'll try to grab that vehicle and put it back in because Hanuman was made to be the guardian. See, this same tradition is the cherubim that's around the tree of the Garden of Eden that keeps things from getting in and keeps things from getting out. Each culture has a form of this. This is the Dath. This is where you have to leap over into this invisible chasm and trust that when you get to the other side, that you actually will reconstitute as yourself again. But here's the issue. The identity at times that we've gained in this previous incarnation, if we don't enhance it a great deal, is rather insufficient. It blows away with other elements that are a lot more convinced about what they are. Would you understand for a moment how convinced water is that it's water? It feels almost everything on the planet. It moves visible and invisible. So in the face of water, it's like being in the face of a tidal wave or something. Like you're just gonna, but not the depth. So just to understand how far it is in our consciousness right now that we need to go. We can make this trip rather rapidly, though, with each other. But just understand, it's getting to the point where you're fearless. Because it could take millions of incarnations for this. And let me tell you what you're attempting to accomplish. See, the image that can be evoked here is when you see, let's say, the mages commanding the elements. The elements are going nuts. I mean, it's like wind, water, thunder, fire, and the whole nine, just trying to shake the unmovable one. Now let's study this term 1 minute, the unmovable, unshakable. This is the original name of the Supreme Being. In all ancient cultures, before the usurping of the knowledge and the flipping everything, flipping the pentagram 360 degrees upside down on its head, the hangman operation, basically. Before that, we knew the name of the Supreme, which was us, was unmovable, unshakable. And this is why. If you're going into your house, which Earth is one of them, these are known as house portals, celestial bodies. So if you're going into your house, but you're coming through the back door, you're a slave. What is the back door? That means if you can't really see what's here, and that would be through the use of the faculties of the third eye, and collapsing those eyes so you can really see and feel, see these different kind of connections of the planet, then that's called the back door because it can only go so far. You can only get so far. And then you're challenged to come through the front door. See, now the front door of the house, because, if you've already been kicked out, your front door of the house, you're basically the owner. So the first being you're going to encounter is going to be that point. You know how they say there's this point that once that choice is made or once that action is made, it forever changes how things go after that. This is like once you finally get out of the body or even experience what it is to get out of the body or play around with that kind of thing, for lack of better terms, your life will never be the same again once you figure out what's actually going on. So this is a challenge. And how you face that challenge is based on how unmovable you are. Like how rooted are you into who you are? Not as, in my case, Sevan, the author of the Code of the Matrix, developer of the Resistance, blah, 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 and all this, but as this being that is even beyond human, supposed to be everything. See, because what happens is if you can at least grab that first idea of being a human, you already know all the humans are made out of all the elements. That's what the 5 stars, that's what the 5 points on the star are. That's all the elements, right? The earth, wind, fire, water, right? And then the quintessence, that's us. So from that point alone, it's already factual. This is the interesting part. It's already factual that we're the lords and rulers and over dominion of the elements. But somehow there's been a Jedi mind trick. Right? Now, the Jedi is a priest of Egypt. It's Deadeye, D-E-D-I. You can go ahead and Google it. So it's a real Jedi. So the Jedi mind trick is what we are involved in here when we don't accept these things. And I mean, don't accept our power. And this is something I'll hold for a minute, and now let there's be some intersections here, just to see if we want to go anywhere else in this conversation.
Can we maybe get into a little bit more deeper into how we get to the point that we can steer our portals, that we can open, close our portals, that we're comfortable with going in such a direction with our spirituality?
Get familiar with controlling your environment. Take charge back in the environment, even if it means retreating from, that current environment that's been set up probably by someone else. Only way to change DNA is to really change the environment. That was shown to be the most imperative way. And so this basically depends on how much a person's oscillating through frequencies during the day and how stable they are. And then when you find yourself stable enough, then you have to go into the biome. Okay, let me explain it to be very, very, very simple. If for some reason I ever lose the blueprint, because how instinctually I would know that imperative that is and how treacherous that it would be if you fell into those kind of situations, you would need to go back to the origin. And it just so happens, because we're on this planet that has so many mirrors for Narcissus, that we can easily go into nature, not Saturn, because remember, Saturn is the lord of technology. Like, people have to understand what you would be dealing with this darker side of Saturn. Okay, because remember, once the celestial body backs out, then the celestial body is under the dominion of another celestial body. So even Mars is under the dominion of Saturn. So that says a lot, because Mars is a very tough component. But then you see how the moon is under the dominion of Mars. And then when you bank left, you have Venus, which is holding, like each planet, if you saw it as a rainbow, is holding a line that the other planet can't actually penetrate. So Mars can't really cross through completely Venus and then go all the way to the sun without inheriting all those energies, which would change it from being Mars. So what I'm saying is, when you cross into other spectrums, you can't avoid actually being coded with that section. The main thing is to remain unmovable. This is what I'm explaining to you. Even when you die, you have to face this. When you come out of the body, there will be lots of things vying for your attention. That's basically what it's doing. And then when you identify with it and lose identity of self, then you merge with it. And then it does as it wishes. It will reincarnate you as one of it. You come out as a tree. If you cannot override those kind of frequencies, you see. And I'm not saying that this is like, you have to be this conquistador. Like, all these people are doing something externally that they would never do internally. So they couldn't even fess up to dealing with the energetic potential of what the real overmind has to offer and to take. Because this is where the training comes in, and we're beginning this. You see, like, this is not, we weren't this privy to talking about this kind of thing on some kind of open network with thousands of people tuning in. That happened about 15 to 20 years ago, really. Even Facebook is a revolution to how well people can communicate with each other. So let's not get ahead of ourselves about the progress that needs to be made and why it's all happening right now. But also let us, again, rejuvenate ourselves with this entire dissertation of this knowledge, because it actually gives us the full spectrum position of where we are. It's tri-merging. Okay, this is telling you exactly where you are. And then you can easily make your advent from there, because that's what a map really does. So if you're lost in this jungle, in the the wilderness or the wonderland. If you're lost and you don't have a map, then everything starts to look the same. Like all the trees look the same, the people look the same. It's like Groundhog's Day all over the place. This is lost. Because when the third eye is on, none of this looks the same. Each encounter that you're coming through, every single day is different because it's changing based on the frequency of the projection of where this is coming from. But if we're so far away from that, and that could be in our consciousness, not necessarily what planet we're on, but if we're so far away from that and so out of touch with that, then we've been in a sense hijacked. And that's what I was saying. When you're dealing with trons, which are gods of technology, electrons, when you're dealing with that, you're dealing with this masters of frequency. And so what that frequency, even from the Saturnalian spheres, emit out into the Martian ear, then is projected into the lunar sphere, and then ends up in the Earth, would be what we would be subject to on a consistent basis until we got to a level of saying, okay, I need to activate ancestor. I need to get into this other state of mind that is more of an adult than it is a child. And I'm not talking about the innocence of a child. I'm talking about the lack of discernment of a child. For us to smack ourselves, realize that, hey, this is still your life. You came in here. You could be talking about other people. You could be with other people. But the reality is, when it looks like when most people leave here, they leave by themselves. So it's the same way you come in, the same way you come out. So it's still your responsibility to figure this out, to ask the real questions. What happens when this goes on? What am I going to deal with in this perspective? So, because there's a lot that can be translated through the information, but it has to be pursued from a perspective of one really trying to get out of here. So what actually creates that? Or get in here, as I sometimes say. What creates that? Urgency. So there has to be something that, in a sense, motivates the individual to want to do this. And unfortunately, people have become motivated by fear, more so than the feeling of what it would be like to connect with everyone and the level of arousal that would be entailed in something like that. Okay? Like these would be ideas or mantras that you can anchor yourself to keep on with your procession. But many people can't anchor themselves on ideas like that and keep going. They must anchor themselves on there being some kind of battle, there being some running out of time, something like this to move their wheel. Okay, so what I'm saying is that what's also happened with the pole shift from a while ago is people have begun to be able to use a specific kind of energy to drive themselves. This is like you eating a specific kind of food versus all of the other foods. And this is what the lunar situation is really about, is because when you have to eat material, when you have to eat matter, okay, if you backed off of this really far out to where the elements don't exist and you look into this world, it looks crazy because everything is consuming itself. And somehow it doesn't actually see anymore that is it. There's some kind of blindness. So imagine watching this. And this is why when you see these pictures of what Earth's supposed to be in the adept mind, you get these weird pictures with these missing limbs and eyes gone and feeding on carcasses, and all this. Yeah. These are all metaphors, okay, for what was mentioned also in that post about when we start to attack the actual system that we're in and begin to consume the system in a frenzy for energy. So how we pull ourselves out of something like this is going back up the ladder. And what that means is that your elements that you consume, because you still are what you eat, need to be worked on to where you can get into energies that are more pure in every tense and also have a greater energetic potential. So let me put it on the bottom would be slowed down plasma, which is blood. So that's meat. That's the beginning of Kar. Like this is the in Kar's nation. Kar's nation is the carnivore nation. They eat meat. This is why the Venusian connection was with the canine, which is the black dog. And all of that connection with basically the meat eater. That's really what the Ouroboros is, because we're all made of flesh. We're all made of plasma. So that's the first step on the ladder. So when we usurp that, right, when you realize it's just all proteins and you just need a complete protein, then you deal with your water. Like this is the next element. right? And then you'll notice that people who eat very bad definitely care less about their water. They'll still be like, give me a Crystal or Aquafina sometime, but it's not a big water connoisseur thing going on with them, right? So, because the next thing is the water, and that's the next thing that most people don't pay attention to. So we're talking distillation, we're talking about remineralization, and then with hydration, we can, with hydrogen ions, we can reinstate the energetic potential of the water. Now the water is done. Next thing, breath. So the breath is really tricky because it means mastering the air element. And the air element becomes when you basically realize you don't have to breathe. So for those that are so far out there and thinking that they need to breathe, then they can understand how far they are away from actually usurping that kind of element. But what I'm saying is that at a certain point, when you go into this other stage, you're not actually breathing anymore, because even the concept of what air is loses its worth, because that's just the whole mechanics of things. So that's a very rudimentary diagram of exactly how to walk your way through the elements. And the reason why you get lighter and lighter, remember, really, it's not the energetic potential that's gone. It's just too many things are connected to the organism, like tubes, and are pulling energy from the actual organism. And it's everything we're giving reverence to. Everything that can sway our emotion. If it can sway your emotion, it's connected to you. And so if you're getting too much of that, then you're just being tossed about. And that's really what the moon controls, right? It tosses the tides back and forth. So it's basically changing frequencies constantly of the individual. So they can never be unmovable. They can never be stable. Like one time of the month, they're like, hey, let's go do this. And then exactly on that opposite pole, they're like, man, I hate this. I'm ready to get away from this. And then through that consistent back and forth, they stay still. In a tense, they're moving, but they don't go anywhere. Do you see what I mean? It's like they go headlong in one direction only to come back again because of being under that kind of influence. And so, today, I guess we're really just focusing on one celestial body. It would really be good to, cover more of the bodies, because this is the formulas. This is what the zodiac is about. This is why someone can actually cast and read a person really clearly if they understand what they're doing with nodes and times. And it's because that is the mission. That is the combination of the harmonic light that was put into that moment to create that individual. And it'll never happen again, because the facts of what phi creates, which is a spiral, and a spiral never goes back to the same place again. That's called phi. While pi, which is a circle, which actually creates time, keeps repeating over and over and over again. And in the world of the adept, this pi and phi thing, that's the last course, because that's when you realize how close the one who tried to imitate the truth. And this could be all of us. I don't want people to see any of these deities, entities, Lucifer, whatever, as separate than themselves. So they run off and they get into more power than you can actually control them with. So I keep it all encased in the crucible, which is inside of myself. But what I'm saying is that when you create a planet that almost looks like a real planet, almost as close to the truth, but is not, damn, you come damn close, don't you? But think about what I'm saying. There's only one other space beside totality, and it's the Devacanic planes. So the Devacanic planes are designed so close to what the pattern that totality uses, it's almost indistinguishable to the average person. And so this is like a Monsanto's apple versus that's been cloned the exact proper way to another apple that it got the gene from. And then to the person who doesn't even care what they're eating, it's like, shit, I can't tell the difference. Well, and this is a big key. Go ahead.
Yeah, Sevan, but when you combine all these, entities and situations in your being, how do you look and how do you communicate it? Is it more like compartmentalization, or is it more
No.
decompartmentalization of things?
It would be definitely decompartmentalization, because what you're doing is what I call the Russian doll. This is the easiest way for you to see it. You basically you have to collapse all these chakras. See, the chakras are the archons. They are the spectrum that's on the rainbow. The rainbow was of the covenant. Okay, so this is basically saying the actual agreement, the marriage, whatever that we have with this is a symbol of the rainbow. And it's because we have these celestial bodies functioning inside of us. And now we've gone and gazing in the stars. When we look within, that's when we get all the answers, right? So the archons are at war with each other because we haven't made peace with them. That's because we haven't put them in harmony, which was where the original oath was on the Mount of Harmon. That's where we get our word harmony. So what has to happen is that the body first, because it's the primary vehicle. See, the body has been living for millions of years. People don't understand what the DNA is actually doing. They tell us what it's doing, but think about it. It's been collecting data over so long, it's gained sentience. And it's connected to our bodies, and that's connected to our soul. So what this basically body believes is millions of years of its existence. So trying to tell it that all of a sudden Ashtar is going to come out of the sky and save it, it laughs to itself. Because never, unless you're in the complete leisure of your reality, would ever believe such things were true. What I'm saying is that when you're in the complete leisure of your reality, like meaning you don't have like threat of war and these kind of things going on around you all the time, then it gives you you can gander very far with different things. But when you need to know what's going to work right now, if you're in danger of your life and you now need to know some level of mysticism to be able to get beyond, you're not going to approach this the same way the person's going to do this guy and put this on a TV set with some Lululemon pants on and a good cappuccino and see if they can get some gleaming today for the astral light. Like it's a whole different thing because you know your time is up. And so what I'm doing is that I'm pursuing it like my time is up, but I'm doing that now because I don't believe in time. I'm unsubscribing to time because time is the real thing. That's the will. That's pi. That's being basically where when you're young, see, all this is like, okay, let me explain it very simple. You're this light, okay? And when you're young, it's super bright. So all of these other things that will shroud you out, they're just hanging out in the corner or the oob, as the Sumerians call it, until your light starts diminishing. And then as it diminishes, it closes in on you, these dark frequencies, until the point where you're on your deathbed and you've been overcome like Samson with the Philistines. So what happens is that you have to keep pursuing this when you have your vigor. Or what people that get older learn how to do is how to deal with their prana. Because the prana and the tantra and all of that and being aroused and being able to basically spontaneously regenerate to get excited again. So because when you get older, it's like, I've done all that, youngster, all of what you were talking about. And that's just talking, though. The doing part is when if the body doesn't function that well and it's trying to handle a high level of energetic potential, it starts to come offline. So this is where repairing the superhuman comes into play. And trust me, if we didn't do so much tearing it up, with the suggestion of others, of course, but still us making the decision, then there would be nothing that needed to be repaired when you get to the age of knowing. Okay, and what is the age of knowing? It's different for every person, but the age of knowing is when you basically wake up. And then when you wake up, that's why they call it the final judgment. Because it's the last time, really, that you'll actually attempt to say what is good and what is bad and all of that. That's what the final judgment really is. See, all of these scriptures and all this knowledge has just been tesseract, meaning turned inside out. The pattern of the tesseract, which is the cross, is another key symbol. This is what is this? This is Euclidean and non-Euclidean geometry. And some are still trying to figure out, well, why is this stuff even important? It's because it gives you maps. If you don't understand the difference between Euclidean and non-Euclidean geometry, someone can project a tetrahedron world right around you of fake-ass Saturnalian spheres, and you would think that you're actually on your way to consciousness when you're just being hosted by a much more grander mind that can perceive what you call consciousness and even beyond that. And that's why the strongest mind wins in this kind of tense. And the reason why I'm talking like this, and there's a lot of battling and things going on in the words and in this world, is because they're the same word. And it's because one has to realize that this is what the Devacanic planes consist of. So when you're saying, well, you need to leave duality, that means you actually had left Earth, because Earth is duality. So exactly. So the best thing is to get into some level of mastery over duality, and just so happens there's tons of knowledge about it. Once you find out that that's what you need to do, then you go on this inner quest. Now, in all this conversation, this is the point where things begin. So see, the deprogramming is not even where it begins yet. The deprogramming is just that part of all the conversation and things that's necessary to convince the person that maybe they need to start doing some soul searching again. And so that's why when we go through this, we've all gone through this and we're continuously going through it. I still deprogram lots of things that are still in my consciousness. And what I do is then I compartmentalize them. What I do is I put them in their own cell, in their own category. And then all those categories sum up into two. And then I collapse those categories. That's a process of the meditation. It's like, okay, kids. All right, all of you different states of consciousness, it's time out. This means now you have to steal your mind, right? You steal your mind back because all the talking and things, as the depths say, let go and get out. Yeah. This means let go of the mind if you can, and then get out of your body. Because then once you get out of your body, you're seeing this other vehicle. So this means you've now taken a portal through yourself. Okay, this is inner space. Why most are trying to look to the sky and want to deal with outer space. There's nothing out there that I even want to deal with. Okay, anything that's out there that may be more powerful than us, watch out, because it's external. In the inner space, though, okay, in the inner space is where the travel and the journey begins. And where you find yourself first is the netherworld. This is the two legs. Some people love to jump to the middle of the body right away with the chakras, acting like we have no legs. And this is because they're dealing with that system of 7, not the system of 9. The system of 9 notes in the legs and below the legs, the netherworld, and then above the head, the higher kingdoms. These two colors are black and white. Okay, so in that lower area known as the dark area, the primordial goo in which everything crawls out of, that is in complete duality. What is duality? Sex. Everything is mating with each other. See, even the conflicts that we're having now only look like energies bouncing off of each other to create other possibilities. Like when you start seeing it so individual, you get a presidential election, a bomb in Iraq, and all these different things. But all these are cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. And there's, an uncountable amount of this going on in the physical plane. So going into the next stage of your consciousness, leaving the duality, leaving the two legs. Okay, the two legs, one walking in front of another in order to say, I'm first. No, I'm first. I'm first. And they call that walking. This is a metaphor of what the deity is like. The deity, of course, is the God in the devacanic plane. That would be you. What happens is that the legs power that being. So even in what we would call outer space, those beings use planets like Earth to keep them moving. That's why they say it's God's chariot. God's riding on top of it. It's Earth's my footstool. Okay, so it's saying that's my feet. And this is just another state of consciousness that wants to hold a person into the foot spectrum of them, of their personality, so that way they can be on top of them. So just remember the play. Everything is vying for your frequency. It's vying for you to say, yes, you're my master. You're my God. You're my controller. You're everything. You're the alpha.
That's why they walk on the checkered floor, right?
Well, yeah, I mean that's a sign of the two opposite spectrums. Basically, those who play ping pong, like, because on the spectrum you see 7 colors, right? And then so those are the different races. Those are all the different spectrums of color, etc. And it always goes through them the ball, as far as when someone else on one end, i.e., black, hit the ball, and then it'll go all down the blues, and then all the rest, and then all through the yellows, and then it'll come all the way back, and then white will smack it back once it gets back that way, and then it'll go through the yellows and then back through the blues, and that's the oscillation. So most people are still caught in that 7-day a week, Monday through Sunday spectrum, never seeing Deus, which means 2, Ordinati, which is basically Diaboli, the entity that the Jesuits have chained themselves to by their own will, under the dominion of their Lord and Savior, right? And this whole connection with the grand dualistic scheme of the Abrahamic traditions, which went back so far before us. It's hilarious that we're thinking that this is just now came out in the Bible, like Abraham and Sarah. I mean, come on. That's like saying Barack Obama and Hussein Barack Obama. You see what I mean? It's like, is somebody playing word games here? Because this is Abraham and Saraswati once again. This is Krishna once again. This is Mark or Marcus which is Marcus Aurelius. This is Luke, which is Lucius. This is John, who's Oannes. This is Revelations, which is the 7 churches and the 7 chakras. This is Jude. I mean, this is the tribe of Judah. You know, the ones who insulted God. Like all of this stuff, if you understand the ancient traditions, is like this is a repackaging and a Shakespearean experience going on in here more so than anything close to truth, unless you can crack the code. Because anything that resonates with a person does have some kind of truth in it, right? So when you can take apart these celestial bodies, then you also can analyze your own body. And that's why a person who doesn't know the universe doesn't really know themselves. They can't know the universe. Don't know the universe, don't know the universe. So when we identify one, okay, we're going to start with the moon, then we start right there in duality, right there terminating at the root chakra. And this is why they show even the entity with like a man with the waist cut off and just the legs walking around, but a face down there by the genitalia. This is the root chakra creature. And this creature exists within us and is a part of something that we've progressed through and that we've strengthened. And then now, and we've used, because this is the other thing, like it kind of sucks to use something and then just kind of throw it away. Nobody likes to be done like that, right? So all of these things, all these different parts of the bodies, all these different animals, all these different experiences are all tied into us and actually deserve something. And this is why in the magical traditions, they even talk about taking care of your camel. Because everything that you're using, you have to respect. Like I was even thinking about my body the other day, and I got a little knee injury very briefly from doing some kicking this ball. And I realized that, man, sometimes you just got to sit back with the body and be like, hey, I do apologize. I was kind of going nuts out there. I did kick it like really hard over and over and over again. And I knew you hadn't really kicked in a long time. And then it's funny because when you do that, it heals so rapidly. Because it's actually it's its own thing, and until we can start seeing it like that, because this is also what allows you to be like the dolphin. You start to care about what house you're going into, who you're really hanging around, what you're reading, basically what you're taking into your portals. So what you're seeing with those eyes, what's coming into those ears, etc. Then one can stand guard at those gates because you're protecting your entire kingdom. Yeah. But as long as the kingdom has been overrun, who would it have been overrun by? None other than the king.
Yeah, one way we have it right in front of us is on the piano, the black and white keys, and those numbers add up quite nicely, I believe.
Yes, they do. I mean, they I think it was 81 keys.
Yeah, also the octave being really just 7, the 8th one being the next one, and in between the black ones.
Yeah, and the do, for example, we have do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, and 2 do's, they are repeating ones. So we basically have seven notes, but the 8th is repeating one, like hidden one. So we have 2 do as opposed to be, and those 2 notes of do can be like black and white in that portal of the music.
Right, and then what you would see is when you get into the throat, these are where the hidden spaces are, because all these mantras, that's basically what they are, phone numbers, they all have originated in a specific place where the proper utterance of these tones, especially through the spine, like because you can make a sound so deep down. And this is why some of the ancient languages still contain words that come from way down in the guttural area, right?
Yeah.
And this is to bring a full manifestation, you need to bring it through all the chakras. Like, think about what we're talking about. Each chakra is a portal to bring something into full existence and not allow it to get trapped in one of the worlds. Is that you have to use all of the power of the manifestation from below the feet to above the head, and when you whip it, and what I mean by that is like it's like a surge when you, or excuse me, an emission from the body when the body is doing these kind of projections, and all of this becomes useful when you're projecting the world that you're going into. See, we're kind of asleep at the wheel with the dream thing. Because what the dream is generally the exact activities that took place during the day, remastered. And the reason is because there's a lot of thoughts going on in the mind that the person doesn't even really know sometimes that are going through there, just to justify why there are certain dreams that you can't identify with things happen during the day. But sometimes when you watch movies, you meet people, different kind of things, you dream about them that night and you can see them clearly. And this is because in the unbalanced body, what nighttime would be for that individual when they go to sleep is the part that they don't actually have access to, the higher light of themselves. Okay? And this is very, very important to understand. So when you start to lucid dream, you've gained access to the higher light of yourself because you've figured out how to put both bodies into balance and to ride the wave. And then now that you're riding the wave, you're actually in between planes. And when you're in between planes, there's no manifestations except for the ones that you create. When you're out of into, and when you create, you either go left in a tense or right. And then you're now into that manifestation because those are the fusing of your choices. So I'm telling you what it is to be a Time Lord is to stand into a space which would be like over a space of nothing. This is why they call the abyss. You can't even be afraid that you're going to fall because there's no bottom. So even once you start to go into, oh my goodness, I'm going to fall, and then it just gets all ugly from there. And generally you just come back to the body if you haven't been forced into that kind of space. But what I'm saying is it's not when you're right about to jump, the time to decide if you're going to jump or not. Because that actually, of course, makes you jump a lot less further. And so to really manifest, there is a state of consciousness that you really only witness within some of these Hobbit movies now, with how that kind of dominance of human character to stand in its ancestry and to stand into who it is in the face of whatever, and then in a sense save the day for yourself. Like, some may see you're saving the day, so others may not. It's not something that really should be focused on. Save the day for yourself. Defeat the dragon. Like, if you notice what these people are saying in this movie, it's just the same story over and over again. That's why people like it so much. In the beginning of the new movie, The Hobbit, the dragon comes out, burns up everybody, right? And then they got the king trying to get away with the gold. And then somehow when the dragon dies, he kills the king. Why? Because the king is the dragon. That's the subconscious program right there of the memory of what is going on. What is going on is the one who exercises dominion, the one who breatheth fire. This works through fear, works through pain. Their symbol is a P. That's Chi-Ro, the papacy. It's specific here. And this is why it gets into a supernatural damn war. And it's not even that we would even want to jump into this the way we feel now after being domesticated, after having most of the tail from the Cossacks cut. You're not running around here like Avatar anymore because the tail is gone. Think about what they're saying. When a being has 30, how would a being have 33 vertebrae in his spine on a 360-degree creation? You would have to have a tail. But then if you don't have a tail, that means you don't have a story. You don't have the rest of the fused links of the chakra centers that actually create your entire line. And so then you wouldn't even know it. And that's the whole, you wouldn't know the ancient knowledge unless somehow you reattach the tail. And so when you have someone else trying to tell you the story, and they want to tell you the story by what they think, and someone else trying to tell about what they think, man, you got to go to the biome because that's not privy to being altered. The biome, of course, is going back into nature. It's not privy to be altered. And there are things, and I won't say them directly here on the show because it's not my place. But if you search, you'll find them. There are things that can progress you through more of the energetic potential of your chakra centers. If you have to see what I call when seeing is believing, because if you haven't seen yet, and this is what I tell everyone, the ones on the line, the ones off the line, if you haven't seen yet fully what nature is with the chakras completely on, then you ain't lived yet. And it's the truth then that truly we have entered into a frequency that is likened unto death, but to an immortal who cannot die, it's sleep. So what do they say? So the gods are dead but dreaming. And this is the stage that one finds themselves in until they wake up.
That's why the devil is in the detail, right?
Devil's in the detail in the devacanic plane. I mean, even our word dev means divided. And we know that the dualistic plane, see, the dualistic planes is it's like the CAD workshop of our consciousness. It's where, it's like a museum in a certain sense. And what's going on inside that museum may be wild. And even when a person, like, let's say, for instance, the whole world comes into this unison and they bring it all together and they come in a unison, what do you think is going to happen next? Goodbye, world. As a physical world, it's because we have so much energy, we can't be contained in a bubble. You can't put us in a circle. See, the depth knows there's a point, but there's no circumference. This means that you cannot circumference me. But once you get a name, and this is why, of course, in the movie they say, "You, oh nameless one, you have no place here." What does this mean? See, the one that has no name does not have a mark, so it cannot be remembered. So it cannot be contained by time. You see what I mean? So it's deep stuff that we're getting into, because of course the name is an anagram for the Amen. We're talking about full blown what you would barely witness from a PS4 these days, but now you're the main character and it's animate to what we're talking about with when you cross into the spiritual state of your consciousness and getting that activated. And of course, that's what we've been working on for 5 or 6 years. It's not just about this message about the knowledge. We got the knowledge, that's fine and dandy, but how do we fix the vehicles? And so that's this step-by-step process. Obviously, you can't be encased by the phone, in one phone conversation. But the thing is that there is a process that you take yourself through to where you start running the gauntlet, and then you get on the battlefield of your body, and you crawl out of the coccyx of your spine, because that's really where the energy is dormant at. That's you in there, aka what they're just calling Kundalini, even though all these energies they had thousands of different terms for different kind of energies, but they just default Kundalini is in the coccyx of your spine. So it's in the tip of where your tailbone is. And then where you should be is all the way up on the crown center of your brain, in a sense, if you want to see it physically, right there in the corpus callosum, which is the little narrow bridge between the left and the right side of your brain, the area that has all the burnt out neurons right now, right there commanding the Jed to be built, which is actually talking back into the lower areas of your body. Like, because when you're working out, you notice this is very useful. If you can actually detach your mind from the body, when the body starts getting tired, oh my goodness, don't tell me you're getting tired. Oh my goodness, are you getting old? Oh no, I'm not getting old. And then it'll start running. It's just amazing how when you think about, you have a universe. And see, some people think this is silly and it's talking to themselves, but oh my goodness, these are the same people that go to sleep at night and blow an entire full-blown HD IMAX theater right in front of their eyes. And then they act like talking to themselves is crazy. You just bought in Auntie Joe, Cousin Nat, some Christy from the 3rd grade, a vampire from this movie that you seen the other day, you see, and now everyone is playing animation in your universe, right? And so this is really what's going on. So
that's where the responsibility comes in, that you have to take for yourself, and it only when you gain that ability to respond can you really do that.
Yeah, I'm just laughing because some things seem so obvious, but are not so obvious. But yeah, it's like that. And that's why also, I'm into something else. It may be a part of my character that I need to really work on, and I'm working on it. But I tend to like to, if I see somebody get beat down by something or getting beat down, I just jump on that thing and just start beating it up too. And what I mean by that is that if I feel like people are outnumbered and outsmarted, especially by individuals who have all this knowledge that we're talking about today, and it's even in more perfection, right? Those who closed the books after the Enlightenment era, if you want to understand it, like there was an Enlightenment era 100 years ago, right? Yeah. And then after all that knowledge was pulled, then they closed the doors. I talked about this on the other show. And all the secret societies that we see today, Illuminati not being one of them, all were formed based on that knowledge, mainly the prior Scion.
Right.
And the prior Scion is, of course, Metaleave. You got the big names that what formed and shaped our consciousness for the next hundreds of years. And then also you get Scion, because if you understand words and how important words are, you have their chief there, which is where the word scientist comes from. So this scion is a tron. It's actually a being that is like wholly created on our minds. And this is why they were saying Yaldabaoth was just so difficult to deal with, because Yaldabaoth was an eidolon, and this is basically the chief archon. Because if you're going through the planets and you're going through the frequencies, after a while you're like, these are all mini bosses. Where is your chief? And then you get to the chief archon, and the chief archon is actually an eidolon. And this is what the Greeks continue to pursue, even when the sects were torn apart. The ones that actually had the knowledge continued to pursue the removal of the eidolon, because this energy and entity was feeding on the person's consciousness, but generated by the person's consciousness like a dream. It was being generated so fast, if the person was on the other side themselves, they couldn't even realize that they were actually generating it. It's what you're doing in the dream. You build the entire reality right before you actually see it from the projection center of your consciousness. And this gives you the feeling that you're inside of something. It's like ultimate virtual reality. You get the feeling that you're inside of something rather than you're actually controlling it, and it's inside of you. You see? So this level of voyeurism is spawned off of what I would call mental spirituality. Okay. And what mental spirituality is, it comes about through rhetoric. That's what Socrates and Plato and all these people were philosophers, philosophizing about spirituality under the order of Pythagoras, who carried as his symbol the pentagram, who had such a secret order that even the seventh symbol of the Pythagorean tradition was never even revealed, which was the most important because it was the key to all the other shapes. But these people, what I'm telling you, they weren't going to tell you the truth, even at persecution. So the mental spirituality is what has been formed today, with them building the Jehovian fields, which is the YHVH template, into each human being through the Abrahamic traditions all the way to the floor of the antithesis of the Devacanic tradition, which is why God says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, I'm the beginning and the end, good and evil, I do all these things. Meaning that now everything is summed up into one body, also known as the corpus. Okay, this is Spiritus Sancti, meaning an actual energetic moving entity that it works with its energetic potential linked into consciousness of real organic beings. Okay, we're real organics. What these beings are false. They are eidolons. And even when a person, these are like, see, you only can understand this if you understand what things were like before. But even now, radios, phones, all this that transmit these frequencies, is totally different than if I'm standing there in front of you, talking to you, and I'm emitting. Now, if I'm standing in front of you and talking and I'm not emitting, which is what the condition we find ourselves in with most people, that's not what I'm talking about. Emission is when I stand in front of a human being, my chakras connect to their chakras. All of us do this. And for that moment, we have this connection. And then through that connection, if I understand how chakras work, I can emit what I'm saying rather than talk it.
Yeah.
Or even through the frontal lobe, you can communicate to a person without talking it. And so, but again, this needs sending and receiving. You can't send something into lead. And this is why I keep telling you about the Saturnalian principle. The alchemical metal of Saturn is lead, is the least affected by light. So if the person is adapted to GMO kind of mentality and they're running on the Monsanto, then when you're trying to project to them, it's actually like trying to project to a knight. On the spiritual plane, when you see people like this that have adapted the full Saturnalian potential, they're gray. And then what's around them is this shell that basically you can't really penetrate. And this is the person that when it's time to get excited, you're like, yo, dance or something. And they're just sitting there and they're like, and you're like, if it's time to sing or something, the person who can't sing in front of everyone, and I'm saying this happens to all of us in stages, and this is why you have to make your move now while you have your vigor, because that whole Saturnalian kind of mentality creeps in through age anyway, and that's why Saturn is a crone. And that's why it's also easy to see that none of these planets are male or female, because last time we checked, a crone was a hag and was a female, but that's the whole Mrs. Doubtfire side of Saturn. And so, and then again, the actors and the stars and all of this stuff that's going on is just a bad representation of something that is really existing through the emission of these eidolons, which is basically the stories that we've created in order to get us able to navigate this space, which is called the void. Because the real knowledge was teaching that basically where humanity actually was in the void, that they had already attempted to make the leap of faith and didn't have the faith and fell into the abyss. And then only those who have their own light can do something about it. And that's why this whole Christ tradition or the crystal tradition came into play, because crystals hold an immense level of energy. So this means even piercing the deepest vortex, you can still maintain yourself. And what I'm saying is you need to be unmovable when you cross a portal. Okay, because when you cross it, there's an event horizon. And then across the event horizon, nothing that worked on the other side, just like they say in the movie Interstellar. I'm just hitting some triggers here for people. Nothing works that you used to use on the other side. And this causes a great level of disorientation, very similar to the same disorientation you had when you were born in this world. You didn't really even know, you don't even remember what you knew and what happened in most of those cases. That's how disorientated you were. So think about it, an old to be and disorientated birth in this world. Yeah. You don't come out knowing. So when you do what we call, see, the real Christy, who's Christ, who can raise Kundalini, can actually take it down and bring it back up. That's what meaning I can kill myself and bring myself back to life is what is being said. That's an actual spiritual technique. That's when the person goes into a high vibration, leaves their body. You've died now. And now you die because you split. Remember, the word is die, which means two. So you've just divided. You've parted, exactly. So now you've parted, and then you're away for a while, and then you come back. See, now when you come back, the reason why all of the illusion shatters is because now you know. And knowing is half the battle, as they say in G.I. Joe. But serious, it's like, once you know, then you see everything different. Your vision changes. You actually see others that know. And because what we're talking about here is that if you get out and then you come back in, you now have what's outside on you. This is like you keep something in a cage forever, and then you let it out one time, and then it comes back into the cage, but now it has that idea of being out, and nothing can stop that. That's what the whole spiritual progression also is really tied into, is why it's tied into the experience, because once the experience happens, man, you're unmovable. Because what happens is, see, the unmovableness comes in grades. The first one is once you've seen the other planes, when someone comes to you with the crazy, off the wall, namaste, oh, brother and sister, it's about this, blah, blah, blah. You're like unmovable with that stuff. Like you're not even like being moved, to the point where they sense from you that maybe you know something else. And then they make room for you. They open up their other portal and they say, hey, why don't you board? This is all going on subconscious. Why don't you board and bring some of what you got over there? Because I'm simply reciting. And this is what most of the Abrahamic traditions consisted of, was simply reciting. They gave, the learned men gave the books to the people for them to memorize, and then they would recite this, that's mantra, over and over and over and over and over again. And then hopefully that mantra was just the name of the genuflection with the energy. But once the book got watered down, the Bible doesn't contain the name of God in it, right? It does contain the name of the Germanic king Gud. But what I'm saying is that notice how there's this big play that and even in Islam, there's no face. You can't see God. There's no name. There's no, you see what I mean? There's a less identification with who the being actually is. The further and further these traditions really roll, because now God's in space. So that means God's not here. First of all, where's God? He's in heaven. Shoot, it's going to take a while to get. Yeah, you're not going to be able to get to heaven this life. Even the space shuttle can't go to where God goes. So the goal is to put it so far away. But that's, of course, to make a person look for it in space. That's why they travel in space looking for God. Well, not the scientists, not the Nazis or the NASA. They just send them back to pictures. That's just all about creating more one-wafas. So to conclude, because we're about 30 minutes in, we talked about how, there is still something going on. And it's hidden within the mythology. But you can see it as simple as the Indiana Jones movie that first came out. I think that was the Temple of Doom or the Ark of, what is that? The Raiders of the Lost Ark. So the power that was found by this particular race, and you can't even say who they are anymore. You just get calls after this. But the power that was found that was taken from Egypt was the knowledge of implosion, okay? What was inside of that pyramid would be the same thing that's inside of every pyramid, which is a 0-point field. Now, also in a 0-point field, the potential of a 0-point field is borderline over nuclear, okay? So it, when used improperly, becomes a weapon, a one-wafa, a wonder weapon, okay? So now this wonder weapon was so difficult to maintain and to control, it corrupted everyone that was around it. That's why it was put into a certain part in a certain pyramid. See, Kepher, who's James, who's Jacob, these are all the same names, okay? Built that pyramid of potential to encase the dweller. So this, we're talking about beings that attempted to encase an eidolon inside of time, which is really what the archons, Cthulhu, and all of that is really all about. It's about beings that are trapped in stasis. Some people even say some of those beings are us, but it's basically putting them in time so that way they just basically dream a reality, but never really enter into a real world so they could do real damage. Now they're in a real world in doing damage. And this is why they talk about this tradition. And this is the father and the mother to all these traditions. Abdul al-Hazred bringing this book, the Mad Arab, as they called him, because the potency of the book. And then they bring it into the OTO, into the Golden Dawn, into all of these different. Remember, the Golden Dawn existed before Aleister Crowley. It was the king, the queen, and the king. Because remember, it's the same person. That's the king, queen you're looking at on the throne. But what happens is that they bought that. They have that knowledge of with the OTO. That was the Queen's Secret Society. So once she took MacGregor Mathers, who wrote the Keys of Solomon. Like, if you understand what you're dealing with, I mean, talismans are ways to put, are basically geological positions of specific energies. And so when a talisman is configured the proper way, it can bring the energy from another space and time. And then once that knowledge was decoded by John Dee, they bought other entities from that space and time, which is why the book only contains demons, not angels, right? That book was the book that contains the angels they put that somewhere else. What is the angel? It's the opposite side of the negative force, okay? So the book that contained basically the solve, like it's like a code. If you have the code, you need the thing that transcribes the code. You see what I mean? So remember the lore of Solomon. He brings in the demon. He asks the demon, what is the angel that thwarts you? And then the demon tells him the angel, and then he writes it down in a book. So what is happening? He's interfacing with these frequencies, which are made of fire. And then he asks them basically, hey, what is your opposite frequency? They tell him, this is my opposite frequency. And from that point, when playing that frequency, if anyone's afflicted by what that causes, if that's asthma, let's say, that frequency collapses that frequency. It's the same thing Rife discovered, but we're just talking about the Harry Potter version, okay? So meaning sending two frequencies at each other, collapse them and make them null and void. So the whole idea is to basically make what was imperfect null and void, meaning put them in the void. So when humanity entered into a state of this ignorance of not knowing what self really is, which is all is self, that creates division because you can't like be everything. So now you're divided. So this creates two worlds then. This is what begins a paradox, is the key word. Now this two world starts. One world that you live in, that you habit during the day, and one world you move through by night. Except for this one was always considered as night. The physical reality is the receptacle. It was always considered as night. And then the higher light, which is what I was talking to you about earlier, that higher part of the spectrum of yourself, you would need to gain your own ability to achieve that kind of light. So you cannot depend on the celestial bodies. You cannot depend on, do you see what I'm saying? Like, see, anyone that depends on, if it's Mercury, if it's Saturn, if it's whatever, in their consciousness has basically yoked themselves with that and says that, oh, it's like having a codependent. Okay, so when we all need this through a certain process of getting back into our state of consciousness, I'm just telling you, as when you finally blow beyond all of this, you don't have any needs. And this deactivates a certain part of the brain. It just falls off like a fuel canister on a rocket ship that's going higher than that canister can even go. And that's what, when you vibrate into a higher frequency, you shake off. You actually shake off these shells. Because remember, I told you there's a gray shell that appears. There's other shells that they're all these colors, basically. All this division layers itself around the person's body when they choose what spectrum and frequency they want to inhabit. And then when you go into these more balance, see, because if you change your vibration, it's because you went into balance. Like if you raise your vibration, it's because you went into balance. It's like watching the rocket take off. Either it's going to take off or it's going to crash back down on the launch pad. But if you take off, then all of the other things that are on you that can't handle that, you fling them off. As the ancient knowledge says, the sun, who is androgynous, flung off all of the other planets in its oscillation, meaning the frequency that the sun's moving at, and it's kind of obvious. Saturn, Pluto, Earth, Venus couldn't handle that and was flung off of it. And then every time you decide what frequency you want to be on beside going through that one, chief head honcho, chief archon, going through that one, right? Then you just move into another frequency and you live either as a Venusian, one life, Venusian half Saturnalian, you may have a Saturnalian wife. You see, so you basically continue the game. And so it's really laid out like this. It's very interesting. I find more and more that, especially things that people gravitate to the most, are direct replications at time of what is really taking place in the higher light, as above, so below. It's just being able to access that is really the key, more so than being able to talk about it, because even as I'm talking about it, it does have certain value for people and they may be fascinated on it, but that's only because you've learned how to eat words. And meaning that we now have got this other field that we feed on. Like if I say, you won the lottery tomorrow, and you really believe you won the lottery, man, your energy just goes through the roof. I mean, it's just crazy. Like you don't even sleep that night. Your leg all moving like you got restless leg syndrome. And like, okay, let's go party again. Because what happens? Now an idea, a word, a world, right? Which is a word or a whirl, right? Has spun your consciousness and powered it up for the time. Now you're aroused by this idea. It's like, yeah, $1 million tomorrow. It's about time, right? So this is what I'm talking about. See, it's all being controlled by this faculty up here. And if we keep oscillating in the Cain and Abel, which is the two temples, okay, this is where all dogmatic traditions. Some people asked me the other day, well, what is this whole thing against Attack of the Arabs? Oh my goodness, how many times do I have to tell you? See, what happened is that the Arabs, there's just two brothers, okay, Bible, as some people point out, okay? So the two brothers, which are basically Ishmael and Israel. And now the Ashkenazis, also known as the 13th tribe, who grafted themselves onto the tree, are taking up the role of Judah, who are basically the black people that are in America, to go to war against Ishmael, whose mother is Hagar and was the slave wife, as they say, of Abraham. So we're talking about a family story again. We're talking about Jim's auntie slept with Jane's, and now we're all rolled up into it. And then it's gotten even some extra flavor to it, and it's what we believe in so much. So that's what you would see going on in the world is the back and forth volley between two different sons and the daughters caught in between. And then when we go beyond that, and that's okay, so that's when you're considering people, as your statement says. Then you go one more stage up, you see them as the frequency, you see them as the planets, right? And then after you get done with that, hopefully you still got some time left this life, you realize they're chief, which is the sun. Then you need to go through the sun. And you can actually do that on the astral plane. You can pierce the highest light. And then when you're in balance, it's not hot, because what you've really done is that in balance, you're not afraid, you're not in emotion, you're not getting overwhelmed. And let me just show you the 2 levels of overwhelming, and then I'll be done with this part of the conversation. The 2 levels of when it's overwhelming. So we said there's 2 energies. There's arousal and there's fear. Okay?
Yep.
So when a person is aroused, if they get overwhelmed, they first enter bliss and then they pass out. I've watched.
Yeah.
And also remember, other energetic bodies can do this. If there's an energetic body that's on a higher frequency, let's say, than an individual, the emission from the energetic body is so high, it's hard not to pass out. And you generally find these kind of entities more in nature, not downtown. Because it's, again, you can, in group think, the energetics are a lot more higher because you have way more current to pull into. And that's why the whole grounding video was teaching people how to ground and use the earth as their conductor. So there's beings that already know how to do that. So they give off such a high level of emission, they can't actually remain solid even. And then when they come around, all you hear is a ringing in the ear. And sometimes this ringing gets louder, sometimes the left ear and right ear, and this lets you know their juxtaposition, okay? And then if you actually went and met on that frequency, meaning the actual communion is when you can phase into that frequency, from that point, you go into, you're basically now interfacing with each other. This is the real communication between us and another being. You see what I mean? So what happens is that how you see it, how you can see everything is you need to phase onto that frequency, and that's what you're really doing with the body. That's where the body needs, that's how the body starts getting into balance. And yeah, there was something else I needed to add to that, but I'll take a moment, and if there's any like direct questions, because I think we've covered quite a bit, but there may be something special that we need to discuss.
Yeah, wow. Also, we talked about the interesting word about the diseases, for example, and what bacteria word means. So bacteria is a mirror for us, and that mirror which one does not want to embrace. And when we split the energy of the bacteria and into words, into phonetics, we get back anteria. Anteria is also as Terra, as planet Earth. So just like coming back to the energy of planet Earth, healing from that bacteria, which can be also energetical and also physical one. As we know, physical is only a effect of the cause, which is energetical one. So just found today.
Yeah,
for sure. I even relate bacteria to Bacchus, because it's always the foundational aspect of many things. But as you know, protozoa, even in the body, is treacherous to the body. It needed it to form its stage to where it's at now. But many of the bacteria, if we add them to the body now, actually overrun the flora and fauna of the body. And that's also just shows us, once again, we have an amazing vehicle because it's really created in a lot of harmony just by itself. It has the right amount of bacteria. It has the right amount of a lot of different things, showing us, really the intention that was put into this. But that's what I was saying also about the power, because the same thing that could really take you into a totally different stage of your entire being could also be the same thing that does the same thing on an opposite level. And this is why we always have to see the door swings both ways. It's a coin, as they say in the Devacanic planes. The other name is coin or Khan. Okay, and these are the same words: coin, Khan, king. Okay, and these words basically mean two faces, because there's 2 faces and 2 sides of the coin. So there's 2 sides to the moon, 2 sides to different humans. Okay, so then it keeps going, and then the original one was Deuce. This is math. Like there was a being that actually encased male and female in the same body, and that was the angel. See, that's the only angel, the one who became opaque. Look at what you're dealing with. Just by math, it tells you that this happens. When splitting from the original, meaning the Big Bang, the first division in heaven, which would be the haven, the first space that you go to, there would be this dual being, which would have a male, female inside the same body, and it would be an androgen. So then when you study the Arabic lore and you study the language, you realize, as Pierre Sabak pointed out, that they're actually centering this entire language around an angel, a specific angel. So these people, as serious as they are half the damn time, if you think of their ancestors, wouldn't have been structuring something around something that didn't exist. So then they go on to talk about how this being basically was their first real God, meaning the first one to basically civilize them, the first one to step up and say, hey, I'm your leader. And we already know what happens when someone does that. And that's why the word leader begins with the word led. And the led is the angel of Saturn, right? It's the whole Saturn alien connection.
Yep.
So what we're talking about is we're talking about, we know Brahma is also Saturn. Brahma is the one that looks like Santa Claus, basically, with the big beard and all that. That's what it's come back to us now. So you find all of this stuff becomes very exact because you have so many instances. And then you can just take all those instances and roll it all together and then get a grand picture of things. And it really takes that. And also, it takes also being non-biased when you're reading certain things and going through those fields, because just in being biased, how many times, especially when we were first studying spirituality, we would close something or close a book just because it immediately started introducing things that we weren't familiar with. And now I go more into an observer mode. I don't have to commit to one side or another, because everything always wants you to be on one side or another. Red team or the blue team this time, or which one do you? Oh, I don't like what God did in that scripture. Then now you're all on this tribe side, and then once they turn against God, then you're like, oh, they did God wrong. Oh, God deserves. And then all this is just an emotional bag that we've gotten ourselves into with the programming that we've been emitting, and is reflecting it back on itself. So the last secret here, well, maybe there'll be more, but here's another one. How you're creating time is you're actually going back into your own life, and you're especially going at specific points to change certain things to get a different outcome. The main outcome that you're looking for is basically to discover that you're immortal while you're alive. And then when you go back or you come back, depending upon what direction you're moving, it feels like deja vu. Because deja vu, because this is the thing. Remember, time is an illusion, okay? Everyone will tell you that. But really, it's easier to understand time as frequencies. As you can look at a tree, and as you move down in the frequencies, you'll watch that tree die. As you move up in the frequency, you'll watch the tree go into full bloom and then go all the way back down to seed again. Okay? That's a time lord. Okay? That's when you start influencing what's going on in your reality. Now remember, it's very difficult to influence things going on in realities that have strong, consistent frequencies before you've even gained a lot of solidity with yourself. So in a Saturn alien field, there's frequencies being emitted, just like on the movie They Live, constantly every single day, sending out one specific projection. So the person needs to get out of that. You see what I mean? They have to break out of those kind of frequencies, and then that's when they'll start to become more familiar with that side of self. And for me personally, it came when I came. You just go anywhere where there's nature; it'll start the path. But the path has started already. Excuse me. But you could use to explore a little bit more about the information in regards to activating the body, and also how there is an energetic potential within nature. And if you don't feel that, that means that now you just have some repairing to do, because most of us generally start that way. Like, you could touch a crystal, you can go out in nature, you could put your feet in there, and you may feel something, or you may feel nothing at all. So that means the conductivity. It's just very simple. You have to just make it basic now. Logic serves for this kind of thing. Conductivity is not good enough, because it's not like there's not energy there. We can test with certain orb meters and different things to see that there's energy there. But if you can't feel it, then that means that the conductivity is low. That always has to do mostly with the water. Because if the water, like, remember the water, if you just put water in something, you try to conduct electricity through it, it won't conduct. You need to put a little salt in it, and then it conducts, right? So the same thing with the body. The body obviously does its own version of salination. That's why urine tastes like salt. So what happens is that, what kind of salts though? Like, what is the real mineral content of your body? Because if you're in Tibet, the reason why they eat certain things like shilajit, curry, curcumin, turmeric, is because all those heavily insulate the glandular walls to be able to maintain the conductivity. Why would you want to maintain conductivity? Because this energy that I'm talking about is so strong. You either pass out or you go into an orgasm. You see, because the as below one is an orgasm. That gets involved with the sex magic. Okay, so the as below version of this energy is through sexual transmission. That's tantra. The as above version is bliss. That's when you've linked with your higher thoughts. Okay, there's never not even be a person there, and then all of a sudden you go into this euphoric state, and then the goal is now to ride the wave. This is like a surfer. This is the wave now crest. Now you're going to jump on the wave. Now the goal is not to fall off the wave, because when you fall off the wave, where the energy comes from is it goes out of the top of the head, where that swirl is in the top of your head. Yep. The energy goes out of there, and that's like a orgasm out of the top of your head. And then from that point, you feel very fatigued. Just like if you let the energy come out of the bottom area after that, you feel very fatigued. But the more the danger with the bottom area, because when the energy comes out of the bottom area, then you are disenchanted. And this is the thing about energy. See, the seed of our bodies, especially for the male, is so important to the whole mechanism of what's going on here. If we don't understand it, then we'll always remain trapped. And what happens is with the seed from the male, when it comes out of the body, then there's a disenchantment that happens. And that's why the male feels not as attracted to the female as much. And it's always like that first at least 2-3 hours. And it's like, okay, honey, I'm going to play video games or something like that. Right. And this is because what's happened is you've sent the Kundalini into the lower recesses of the body. This is the beginning of a sorcerer. Because sorcerers use that lower energy in the sex magic to magnetize other people. And that draws them to them, and then it holds them to that individual. Okay? So this is what you would see the people in Hollywood and things. This is the magic they practice. This is what Crawley introduced, and Frater Akkad, McGregor Mathers. It eventually went to sex magic. And so beyond that, again, with the higher thoughts, now this becomes more difficult because, first of all, you needed to understand. That's why I was saying that the back channel only goes so high. It only goes as far as the arousal will take it from a material level. Now you got to figure out how to get aroused on what you would call more of your mental level. And the only way to do that, really, from my experience personally, is for the male especially, to hold on to his semen. Because at that point, everything is arousing to you. And if you're not trying to make a baby, you'll find, and they say even if you are, you will actually even create a baby without going through that process, but it'll just be a different kind of baby. But you'll find that now all the vigor is increased. Now this is where I guess some could say that things get a little unfair. And it's because now for a woman to highlight what she needs to do is much more difficult for a man, but it's still difficult for him to accomplish it, but it's very difficult to explain it. And this is because for a woman to begin to generate these energies, she needs this other pole, just like for a man, because what the man has really done is he's basically fallen in love with himself. He's decided that instead of spilling his semen all over the place, he's going to keep it within and for that special girl. And then what happens is that it starts to build up, and then it starts to make its way up the spine, especially as the person is practicing the proper breathing techniques, which close the coccyx. Now, for a woman, what she has is she basically has the incubator. So during her certain cycles, she has to deal with the energies to concentrate the energies within her body. And this is what they call her ur. And the Ethiopian tradition seems to know more about this than anyone knows about this today. But it's basically about how to cultivate the fluids that a woman has as she's going through the cycle in order for her to create the magnetics. And that's, of course, the secrets of Magdalena. And I'm telling you, the secrets of Magdalena would be the most suppressed secrets. Like if we were ever trying to scour for any information, hacking the greatest astral databases, it would be simply matriarchal knowledge that is on the wane. And it's because you have that whole hermaphroditic approach to consciousness coming from the Lord, Spiritu Sancti, and its triumph over earth that it wants to dominate. And that's why the men come up with the robes on and the wigs. You know, it's like they're trying to emulate the mother. Maritime law became the emulation of the law of the sea, which is the Merovingian. And then the Mar, of course, is what was discovered during the Enlightenment era, that even the organs from our body, that when the Tibetans were putting together these bodies, came from shells and what you see inside of shells in the ocean. Okay. And this is George Haeckel's work. Okay. And because that what happened was is they hired basically it's just like when they built the Library of Alexandria. They told them, hey, if there's anything weird you find out there, any weird magic, any weird shells or anything like that, you bring it in, we'll pay you for it. So because most people were fishermen, there was no limit to the things that they kept bringing from the ocean during the Enlightenment era, and that was all of really the annuals that they needed. Because you find the helmets of the Attila the Hun, you find the Viking helmets, you find the encasements of the highest levels of geometry in the radiolaria. You find even Mary as an actual sea anemone or something of that nature, meaning the patterns that you're seeing. You're seeing the Maltese cross, and you see all of these patterns, but you see them how nature delivers them, okay? And this is when you realize the trick. When you see Haeckel's work, George Haeckel, it's public Wikipedia Commons, then you see the whole trick to everything. You see pi then, because you'll see the one who's wanting to emulate and be the creator, but is not. So it's that same personality, and that's what I was saying. Hone in on it now. It's the same personality that was in the beginning of the book. I'm the only God. There's no other God but me. I'm your Lord. I'm the King of Kings. See, once he said the King of Kings, you had already identified him, because there was only one that attempted to bring forth that whole consciousness. And it's in the Gnostic tradition. It's in the book, the Terra Papers. It's in all the books. They talk about this same kind of mentality, aka Golem, who gets the ring. Okay, that's the earth. The earth is a circle. It's the ring. The Lord of the Rings is the chief archon. That's the one who controls all the planets. That's basically the sun. So to get the ring of the planet and to get its cabal is to get its language. The ancient language spoken by, the only ones I know to reference it would be the Tamil, people who spoke Tamil, and the Kemetans. That ring or that language, that cabal, that cable, meaning A should connect to Z, was in the hands of, that's what I'm saying, that's what was in the hands of the ruler of the planet. Okay, so remember, so how the lore continues to go is that this being had this power. And first, all of its children were around. This is math again. Like after that one being androgynon there, it brings forth its own son. Right? It's now an immaculate conception because it was birthed from a temple that wasn't built by hands. Meaning that if you are an androgynon and then you impregnate yourself and then you bring forth a child, you've now immaculately conceived. And then also you've done that in the temple not made by man's hands, because no man built what's inside of the body. Right? So now you're basically, I'm walking you through, it's as easy as ABC. There's no other numbers beyond what you would call 3. But the real sequence is 2, 0, 1. And through the path, at times you will confuse 0 for 1. And now then I just want to explain that very briefly. We got 5 more minutes left. 2 is where most people begin. Born in duality in the dualistic plane. They want peace. That's why you hold up 2 fingers. Never realizing peace will never get them wholeness. It will never put them back together, because you can't get unity out of peace. It's an oxymoron. Okay? So that's the first play. That's what I like to call the energy of the United Nations. Everyone's going to be together and we're all going to have fun after this next war. And that's how the papacy brings forth their energy. And then once one peeps them out, they immediately go to 0. This is wholeness, down the rabbit hole, inside, in the cave, thinking whatever they're doing, as long as I do opposite, I may make it, because they are definitely doing something wrong. And this begins a certain part of the path. But guess what? Just because you're now inside, and that's what happens with the person's mind that retreats. They go to the cave, and now the mind just starts going nuts. What, when, why, where, how? The wilderness, right? So the person stays in the wilderness of the womb for a while. And then if they make it out of that, if they can figure out how to merge the 2 with the 0, they get to 1. Okay, and this is like walking back up the pyramid. Now, the reason why 1 becomes important is because it's really a tube. It's like a straw. It allows you to pop the bubble. See, so what happens with this is that because the reason why you have to understand that one is not it, because it doesn't have a word. Like, see, one is the last time we could track it. It's like, well, after unity, then comes something that we can't speak of. You can't put a word around it. You can't hedge it in. You can't put it in a vessel. You can't do any of that. So you can't even call it anything. We just know that when you merge the zero and you merge the two, and then you bring them back up the pyramid, then you go out the straight pipe. See, the straight pipe is the center staff of the rod of Hermes. The rod of Hermes, in this case, being an exact blueprint of how the internal system is set up, as you've seen it. And then when you take that pole in the middle, you go right to the globe. This means you're going right to the sun. Forget all these mini bosses, which are basically the Sephiroth. That's why they show the snakes entwining the tree, right? Now you go off on one path, Tifereth, you're all off on one path. This is left, right, zigzag, zig, up the tree. Now, everyone already told you a map. This is not the best way to get to the destination. You should go to the straight line. But of course, through Tantra, through yoga, and through those experiences and what they equal on an energetic level, this is how we begin to climb the tree, basically back to our original selves. And then after a while, if you catch on, you'll realize you just need to go straight in, because when you're zigzagging, this also means you're choosing. So you're basically electing evangels. Oh, it's Archangel Michael. Oh, it's this and this and this and this. And oh, it's even nature. Like all these are just different paths. Okay. And then but when you start realizing what's going on and you start seeing the blueprint, this is like a deja vu on a Groundhog's Day. It's like, oh shit, all this connects. Okay, well then, and then you start sitting down, and then the most impacting simple stuff the most simple things just have the craziest impact on your mind. And then you just start asking the straight up questions like, how would it really fit for me to get out then based on what you know now? And then you say, well, you got to go straight in. And then to go straight in, this means now you cease being a downloader. Downloader is the one, basically the sun is just spraying you all in the face with its frequency. Mm-hmm. And then that's basically projecting the reality on you. And that's where everyone's rolling at. They get up early in the morning because the sun gets up. Let the sun not get up and see how these people look. So if you realize what's going on, then you know what it is, that the sun is spraying out its rays as what would be seen as the masculine principle of the whole solar behavior, while it's also a portal. So it's containing its feminine principle right there because when you go through, it goes from electric to magnetic. And then electric burns us. Magnetic feels great. You see, so then we cross over the event horizon. We see the sun is not hot, but a jump gate. Then the jump gate unites with solar core. That's the only way it can actually drive itself like that. Then where you're actually going in all this is not out. The sun is only a visual representation of all this, as the space is basically a glass vault mirror. Inside, through the solar plexus, through the back channel, coming out the back channel or through the front channel of the solar plexus, then up through, straight through, and out the ejector seat like Willy Wonka's great glass elevator, bam, and then you pop. And once you pop, your shell breaks. Now, hopefully at that point, because what you're now going through is the same thing that you went through when you came in this world. At that point, you'll know how to guide your ship. And you won't drive it into another magnetic field that is stronger than who you really are, or else it'll just wipe your memory. Just like when you put a credit card in front of a strong magnet, no more information. Yep. And so where we keep our knowledge, and this is also, I want to tell woman this because, I gave man some props tonight about his energy creating machine, but woman has this space. And this is known by the highest of depths. And I don't even know if they're even going to write about this stuff anymore, but woman has this space where she can keep things. And that space is so useful because nobody can wipe that. This is why I believe Earth is still here, because even if whatever they did, whoever they is, the minuscule inkling worm, which was basically, there's another name for this. It's a seed, basically. And then in the seed, it's a seed and an egg. And basically it's impenetrable. And it's kept within inside of the primarily feminine side of the planet. So it's like the preserver. So this is how it is. And, and it's amazing. It's kind of like, crazy because you're in it. but no crazier than a dream that you're in. And this is the last thing about the dreams. See, some people, they denote dreaming as when they're laying down in the bed asleep, not walking around. Okay, because they say, I'm walking around in the real world, so I know I'm not dreaming. But in your dream, you walk around, but you know you're dreaming. So just because you're walking around doesn't mean you're not in a dream. Just because you're doing things in front of computers doesn't mean you're in a dream, because the real knowledge says that it is an illusion. Because what happens is that anytime you can't perceive what everything is, then you cut it, you refract it, you take the gem and you cut the facets to what you want it to be, what you can understand. And this is why when you see something out in nature now or out in the world now, you can say that's a chair, that's a car. You don't say that's hydronium ion 0.52, and that's 565 hertz with a slight tinge of 533 megajoules. You don't identify it as that. You say chair. So what happens is that same thing with your name, Amen. It became hidden. You became nameless in a certain tense, because when we say your name, let's say James, and you're this orchestra, because all the chakra centers, when playing in harmony, sound good together. But when they're in a universe, meaning united in conflict, uni together, verse in conflict, then they're not playing well together. Then you can't, that frequency you don't want to identify with. So that's why you choose this one name. It's Sevan, James, whatever. But your real name is a sound that never repeats itself twice. Mm-hmm. And this is how unique of a being we're really talking about. And so just hold on to that. So remember that it's facts about you being a master over the elements, because you actually contain all of them, versus, see, water has a hard time being fire. It has to go through a whole metamorphosis process. But the human can be fire and water at the same time. So who's more superior? Well, you would say the human, unless somehow the human lost identity of itself, started just being the little bit of water that it is and neglecting all the other elements that it contains. This is exactly what you would see being done in the reality, to why people haven't been able to magnify themselves to who they really are.
Wow, Sevan, that was the poetry for the years.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, listen, we're at the 2-hour mark, past it, and there's one more thing that I would like to give you a possibility to explain, but also just from where we are right now, with our understanding of all of that, just a really brief look into the nearest future, into the nearer future. And I would also like you to mention your new portal, and how that can help us to, connect in the future.
Because we live in the area of the Saturn now, and Saturn Uranus, but Uranus is also connected to Saturn, and Saturn is Kronos and time. So, what can you say about that? The energies of that?
Well, I mean, it's all a sequence. So obviously, Uranus is actually the father of Saturn. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Actually, Saturn is the sun. Okay, so it's not the father. Which is where we get our word Earth from, is of the Chaldees, which is basically the origin land. And so what happened was the father usurped the son. Excuse me, the son usurped the father, castrated the father. And these shouldn't be seen as people, they should be seen as frequencies. Thus, the planet turned over, meaning that basically like a man turns over in his grave, then the son ruled. And this is what you see in the Bible, that the God of the Old Testament is not the same God as the New Testament. The God in the New Testament is one of his sons, which is kind of obvious though. But again, if everything's coming from one point, that means everything can jump up and say it's the son or the daughter and actually be telling the truth. So it's just about what parts of this are we going to accept, you see? So that's where you get and then obviously the color is very key, because the planet of Uranus is actually the cyan color. So that lets you see where it's at on the frequency spectrum also, and how that connects in with what goes on the planet. Because see, all of what you'll see in nature, especially with the color spectrums, with sulfur, when you add sulfur to water, all those are the alchemical procedures. The alchemical procedures are direct mirrors of the actual process that takes place in the body. Remembering that the alchemical procedure was to turn dirt into gold, meaning to turn base matter, food basically, into seed or potent seed to actually quirk life. That's semen. So what I'm saying is that if our body contains the ability to condense ourselves, it contains a time machine. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, if we can produce this seed, we have a time machine, because what the seed is a younger version than us, and it actually contains the strongest bonding of Adam, which was basically, obviously they say it's the first man, but Adam was a male female. This is how remember, the sun is a male female, but look at the word sun. See, that's the word game, and the word game came from the poets, okay, and the poets are the Po. And even the Chinese talk about the Po because they were so terrestrial. They had been here on the planet for so long. They were like, when you left, what you left behind that was still animate was the Po. And then the popes became, in a sense, the rulers over the lower planes, because they basically agreed to remain in the lower planes. Like, it's their whole thing to just be in these low frequencies and rule over these low frequencies. So that's why that's why in their lure, they say, oh, you can't get to the Father unless you go through the Son. Meaning you can't get to the Saturn unless you go through the Sun. And so all of their process is backwards, as the word indicates, backwards. The goal is to turn the entire world backwards. And by moving it from the direction of life to the direction of death, the direction of life being what you see when the clock let me show you how you tell the direction of life. The opposite way the clock is moving. It's so fucking simple, excuse my language, but think about it. Like, as time goes forward, you look at that clock, right? You see how that thing is spinning. As time moves forward, you're getting older. Mm-hmm. So what is the direction of, because this Widdershins or diesel, which is, which way am I spinning? Are you a Nazi or are you an Aryan? Oh, do you still think they're both the same? Look at the star. That's why I say, you see that star? No, sir, I see it. Meaning, oh, all this is occult. Like, you won't know until you actually know. Somebody has to recite it to you. It's not written in books. Because notice in the Bible, right, they always have this part to say where God's communicating this knowledge, and then he tells the prophet, don't write that. It's because the knowledge that is contained in the gnosis, see, what you just know already. And that's why we're all in this same frequency. We start saying the same thing. That's gnosis. It's a book that's invisible, but we all read from it. It's a frequency. We all feel it, because what's written down, anything that was ever really worth something, has already been erased, has already been burned, or is chained down in the Vatican. So let us remember, I'll tell everyone the site, secretenergy.com. It should be opening for beta by the end of this month. That's just where we're going to finish the last testing. It's dynamic. It has a lot of different features, too much to really get into it explaining now, but just remembering it's open source spirituality. So everything that open source did for these people's business, and this is really entertaining to me at times, that how the most ingenious people put their genius in something that is going to decay. Like, all you have to do is take that same knowledge and fire it into the void. And then watch it. Just like when you fire a frequency into water, it bursts life. So that the void is the womb. And this is why, remember where you're going with your state of consciousness. You have to be comfortable with being in a space of nothing. Right? Mm-hmm. Because you're everything, so you're nothing then. Because that's like the next step in math. So then once you're there, then you're actually everything. So you're omniscient now. Now you move through everything, but guess what? The energetic potential of everything is also moving through you. That's the challenge. Mm-hmm. That's what we're all working to actually overcome right now, as far as being able to hold ourselves when we're actually in that state of all presentness. That's why we divide. We're like, oh my goodness, I don't think it takes that much. They fling you off like a carousel that's just gone too fast because you didn't make it to the middle. If you make it to the middle, because remember, it's all happening now. That's why the days are moving faster. If you know what I know, you know the days are moving faster, but the clocks are staying the same. Why? Because it's exponential. We're entering 0 point field for real. But it's not so much as a 2012 thing, it's a 0 point field of yourself. And as you start getting into that 0 point, you're going to go to the event horizon. And I'll tell you, whether it happens this life or a million lifetimes from now, you're going to have to trust. Trust yourself and trust that all is self.
Yeah.
And remember, the deprogramming is getting rid of the doubt that you have in yourself that's been embedded from when you've made mistakes when you were younger, when you were doing things of volition of other frequencies influencing you. Meaning that when younger, all the jams, even if they seem not to be completely fair at all and you didn't have any power, were still things, whether you understood how you did it or not, that you brought about, even through coercion. Okay, some things can coerce you to use your projection power to bring in a manifestation that ends up wrecking your life or causing scars. Okay, and so what happens is these are cracks. These are basically what you would call inclusions in the gym. So as a diamond body, as a Christie, you would have this inclusion inside. And notice if you watch a crystal, when there's an inclusion, it's soft. Some people say you can't even get them out of there, but you can. You use a laser. And this is basically you pinpointing in the zone your consciousness using laser, which is Solomon Shamir. That's what Lazarus ended up becoming in the New Testament. But you're using this to basically awake the dead. So what you're doing is you're killing the cancer. Because remember, everyone has cancer. It's just to what degree they start appointing it, that they start recording it. Okay. And what is cancer? Cancer it's of course related to a serpent, but it's a dead cell. So it's an inclusion then. It's a part that's stuck. It's even carbon. And so to zap that out of there, you need that laser. And that's the precision of knowing exactly what you're doing with the order. Remember, the order is in the body. The order is in the universe. Is the reason why the thing doesn't slam into another thing and then all this rubble just starts falling everywhere. And it's because there's order, just like the same order that exists within your body. And then the more you put it in order, like remember, there's nothing that you need to be master over except for yourself, but you're going to have to go in there like that. You're going to have to go in there turning over tables. You have to literally back the gonads down. The gonads are this lower area of the body. And again, this depth knowledge knows a lot about the gonads are basically the goons. And they try to overrun the kingdom. They run all the way up from the lower levels of the body, basically breaking all the chakras. This is when the sexual energy is breaking itself up through the body and then into the brain. Then they say, oh, he's got fire in the mind. Now his mind is poison. So what happens from there is the gonads enter into the holiest of holies. This is where the pineal gland sits. Then throws out the consciousness because the consciousness is now is basically in an arena that it doesn't even understand. After all, it's used to remaining in this high state of consciousness. Now it's overrun by gonads. The gonads then throw it out of the upper regions of the body, and then it begins tumbling down. This is called the fallen angel, tumbling down the ladder of lights. So you go down through the chakras, each world becoming more surprising and more harsh for the being until they land in the seat of their Cossacks. And that's where you'll find them chained down. And so now there's a prison break going on. Prism break. We break the prism because see, the prism, if you understand the knowledge and the tradition, is used to trap light.
It's a prism.
It has no other use. So once one breaks that prism, meaning shattering this rainbow and idea of separations, now they come out of the Cossacks and they come with this energy, and this they call this Kundalini's rising. And so remember, the only antichrist is anti-Kundalini. So then the Kundalini's coming up, and now it's like warring with all the chakras because it's actually going into those chakras with force, trying to balance things. Hopefully things are balanced and then move through. See, the Kundalini is not trying to get stuck in another chakra because if it does, it just becomes the deva of that world. And remember, this is happening with a lot of people as they experience more about their spiritual energy. They get all the way up to like the navel, all the way in certain areas, but going through the back channel. And then they get stuck because they think, oh, this is it. I'm here. I've achieved it. There's no such thing as it's over. There's no such thing as a goal. You need to get familiar with the energy is what we were saying. Mm-hmm. So you have to get familiar with it being infinitely like this. So this is what it is. And just remember, we're seeds from a tree. We all have an opportunity to grow up and to be big trees. All of this stuff is laid out as simple as that. But remember the parable of the sower, because it becomes most important, especially during these times, about the birds, who are the angels or the angles, or these different frequencies that will try to pluck the seeds up that don't fall into rooted ground. While those who root in a little bit, meaning you read a couple things and then all you did was read and you didn't experience, can sprout real fast. Like, man, that boy's shining, and then wither away because the roots are not deep enough to pull the water. So just look at that parable again, and then think of yourself as the seed, and then think about how your seed is falling, and then what is around. As like a turtle, you're wanting to make your way back into the great ocean and then grow up into be the big turtle rather than being food for something, you see? And just remember, though, also, it goes around, so it comes around. They call it in Chinese, yi ting. Yi ting. It's a Chinese word, actually. It means to power one's vehicle based on consumption. It means basically the opposite of what implosion is really about. So the last thing is that the difference between implosion and explosion, Oppenheimer, continuing in the vein of Hitler's paranormal division and all the rest of those that followed that lineage, breached deep into the vaults and grabbed what was called the Vimana Shastra, which gave them knowledge of proportion to a UFO dynamic. Okay? It also gave the knowledge first, though, of implosion. This is basically the same practices that we're attempting to perfect now with our breathing, because this is what the Tibetans and all these individuals knew, is how to turn air and compress air and then turn it into an energy and then use that energy to propel your consciousness. So it just so happens, so it creates a time machine. You basically implode, right? So when that knowledge was turned 360 degrees, so meaning turned upside down, it's an upside down pentagram is the symbol. When it's turned 360 degrees, now it becomes explosion. And this is why Oppenheimer quotes the Bhagavad Gita, now I become the destroyer of worlds. So, and this is because you can always know that every knowledge has its opposite. The same thing I was telling you with Solomon and about the angels and the demons. So just look at that as a metaphoric level. Everything that you're experiencing in life, no matter how great the magnitude is, has something that can cancel it out and make it null and void. So when you learn how to get familiar with those things, then it's very easy for you to enter into the advanced state of consciousness because you have nothing warring against your mind. And so that's the state that we hope to achieve rather rapidly, and we hope to be able to teach others or show others how to do that, and also that we all learn how to do that with each other. So this is, like I said, the platform hosts that. It's something that allows us all to connect with each other. It gives a curriculum that talks about these principles that I've discussed slightly today in much more detail. Also in the stage in which they should come in. There's no reason in trying to figure out what's going on with old Vast Face, which is the entire Kabbalistic plane, when one has not even left the netherworld and thrown back the curtain on old Wizard of Oz. You see what I mean? So it's a process of this climbing. And then what we want to do is we want to create a bridge. See, when we create a bridge, that means that a person can process and progress through all of this and get back to their totality rather rapidly because they're going over the proper converters. So this is easy to see. See, in the hood and in the ghettos in different places around the world, the bridges are collapsed. And even on the spiritual plane, when you look, the pipe that gets to them is broken. And I have my own suspicions about who ransacked those, but it doesn't matter. Now, as organic people, every time you send out a message and a mission, it becomes a tube. When you connect, if you can be that bridge, then those frequencies can basically walk through you. And that's what a portal is. That your reflection, it's basically a mirror. So they're looking at themselves in a higher light. Remember what we talked about today. The reason why they can't conceive that, this is sometimes people have nightmares all the time and bad dreams, and they're wondering why they're not having these great dreams of laying at the beach. And it's because they have lost the higher light. So when they can phase into it again and they see it, and comes through mentors, this comes through good examples, it comes through what you're doing, then they're able to correct themselves and they correct their balance. And then once they're corrected their balance, they can spin. Just like, if you take a tire and it's out of balance, it can't go as fast as a tire that's in balance. So the entire body is a wheel. And so just like our parents said, don't reinvent the wheel. That's tarot, which is another word for rota, which gives us our word rotate. It's the sequence of life And so when you understand it, then every single day, there's other things that you can engage in. You'll find that there's so much stuff where you do, you'll have a hard time paying attention to all the silly stuff in the rhetoric. Each day is an element. You should get yourself familiar with that element. Like you can turn on Spotify, just play the wind for one day, next day water, make your own days up, but make sure that you're starting to change your environment and be innovative. Because getting out of a vortex, it was a lot to get out of Atlanta. I left Atlanta last. That's Atlantis. It really is Atlantis. And it is Georgia, which is where a lot of the occultations have been going on with the Atlantean tradition. So it's also easy for me to spot them within the field of quote unquote, I call it the pie-based spirituality, the artificial spirituality, but hoping, even though that they're at that stance now, that hearing more of this truth breaks that old Saturnalian shell, allows them to even have the vision to see who that they can become and beyond, and that they leave the old programs. So remember this, the last thing, with what's going on in the world, these people have not even touched energy yet. If you think that these vampires and all this stuff, Illuminati and all this stuff, have been familiar with energy at all, they're scared of it. It's a real thing. You can't even hold yourself together unless you're true. So they go in the opposite direction. But remember, if you make that leap and then you return, which would basically be like another quasi-messiah, and this is going to happen with several individuals, if you return with that energy is what they will even look to. And that's how things change. The stronger frequency always dominates. But it has nothing to do with numbers. In fact, the strongest frequency that I checked was 1. When you really think about it, it wasn't 5,000 Googleplex and yottabyte petaflop. It wasn't that. That meant that the energy was a lot more weaker. But that also shows us the direction that this consciousness, this program is attempting to take us. It tells us the more powerful. But that's not even true based on how we understand our dynamic. So that's the funny way of seeing it, because it shows you the way in and also the way out. So that's all I have to say today. I do definitely appreciate you being available for the conversation and taking the opportunity to get in touch with me so that I can come and speak. Also looking at a lot of the work and taking it in for yourself and seeing what you think. And that means more than anything to me. And so, I just wanted to make sure that I say that, because it's sometimes we forget to say things. I noticed that this is the level of being really awake, is that even one time, when you're deeply in the rabbit hole, right? It could be your birthday and everyone, like 2 or 3 friends that just like your diehard friends are there. And you're just there all morbid. You don't even say, hey, thanks guys for being with me for years and years as a companion on this adventure. You ain't about none of that. So because that's a certain stage of awakening. But then when the grander awakening comes, it's like you don't miss a beat. You're like, man, you just on, you're really getting it. So, I'm working for that too. Just trust me. All of what I said tonight, people should understand. I'm just recording what's going on in my process towards totality, because I got to get there. I really do have to conquer death this time. And it's just because I realized that if I know this much this life, this probably meant that there was a bunch of lives learning different things and being in different ashrams and different mosques and different churches and getting stuck there in those houses, and then finally making it to the point where I can bring it all together within myself.
Yeah. Sevan, you're a gem. Wow, such inspiration.
Truly.
Like,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll hope we'll meet again and
of course we're gonna kick it again. Like I really love the conversation. Obviously, you get an idea a little bit of in this conversation of the range, and so that means that when you really have something that that you just want to tackle, because based on your post, you already understand a great deal of this, and you're obviously being guided by your higher self. So, but when you want someone to just go in and just tear it all apart and put it all back together, you definitely can call your brother, and I'll be there within a twinkling of an eye, no problem.
Thanks. Well, much love to you, and speak soon.
Okay.
Yeah, so bright, 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 let me shine, 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 bright, 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 on your mind, mind, mind. Yeah, so bright, bright.